Hi everyone! Welcome to part 2 of our remote learning assignment, Making Graduation Cards for Seniors. Last week you did some brainstorming and came up with 3 designs that you mocked up on folded pieces of printer paper to see a preview of how they would look on a real card. Here are the examples I did. Now it's time to choose the best design and create that real card. On Monday, May 18th, I'll act as your art director and look at your choices to give each of you individual feedback and suggestions for any improvements you'll need to do before you paint and complete your card. When the final design has been established and approved by me, you will move on to the next step. Now that you've narrowed your ideas down to a favorite and you've implemented any necessary changes, it's time to make the card. I'm going to demonstrate using this design with the hand throwing the cap in the air and the flowers and the confetti. But before I do anything, I need to set this aside because I want to cut the paper down into a reasonable card size that will fit into an envelope. We're doing 5x7 cards because that is a traditional card size and it's easy to find envelopes for those. So I set that aside. Let's gather up our materials here. I have the watercolor paper pad like you have. You're gonna need rulers or ruler. I use 2 here because I like this one for the fact that it's see-through and it has guidelines, so it helps me when I'm marking measurements on the paper. But I don't like to use it to cut because, as you can see here, I don't know if you can see that really close up, but there's a nick out of the ruler because I used this for cutting when I really shouldn't have, and the X-Acto blade tends to get caught in any nicks or grooves on a plastic ruler, and it can jump off the track and really injure you badly. So I don't like to use this one for cutting. For cutting, I like to use a metal ruler. Also, I like a metal ruler that has cork on the bottom so that it raises up my ruler off the paper. If you're ever using it for doing any kind of ink lines with a micron pen, it also keeps the ink from running underneath the ruler and getting smeared. You can also mark it with any kind of a ruler. Let's say you only have a plastic ruler at home and you're not going to cut it with an X-Acto knife. You're just going to use scissors. Then use any ruler you have to mark it and cut it with scissors. I cut with the X-Acto knife because I prefer the precision of the knife blade as opposed to scissors. I have more control over this than I have of this. If you have one and you're very good with an X-Acto knife, by all means use it, but do it safely with a metal ruler. Otherwise, scissors will have to do. So I'm going to try to measure this in a smart way so that I end up cutting less. Your paper is 11 by 14, so you'll be marking it at different places than mine. Mine is 9 by 12, but you will cut your paper down to 5 by 7, just like I'm cutting my paper down to 5 by 7. You're just starting from a different size initially than I am. So I could use one of these edges that's already cut and measure over 7 inches and make a little mark. Then I'll come up a bit further and measure over 7 inches and make a mark there. Then I'm going to just position the ruler so that the edge is aligned to the dots that I made, the 2 little marks, and I'm going to mark that with pencil. So this is 7 inches, and this will end up being the height of the card. Because my paper is 12 inches and I want it to be 10, I'm going to have to cut off 2. I want to keep this, again, this nice edge right here so I don't have to cut it. And I will position the ruler at 10 in 2 places. And this is another reason you can see I really like this ruler because the grid allows me to align it with the edge of the paper. That way I can be sure that my lines are not crooked. Okay, this will do it. I'll just kind of connect the dots here with a line straight across. And there we go. I don't want to cut the paper in the pad, so I'm going to tear it off. And I'm going to put a cutting mat underneath. If you don't have a cutting mat, Of course, you can use cardboard, or sometimes even an old magazine can work. Okay, oops, grab my ruler, that out of the way. So now I'm going to just position the metal ruler with the cork side down, and using my X-Acto knife, I'm going to score down the paper on the cutting mat so I don't damage the table underneath. Okay, that'll do it. Now I'm going to do this edge. Okay, great. So here's my card shape. I just need to fold it now. So it's 10 inches, as you can see. I'm going to make the tiniest of marks. I don't want to get a lot of pencil all over my paper. I'm just going to mark this at 5, very small. Go to the top and mark this at 5. And I do not want to have a pencil line going down the middle of my paper. So I'm just going to fold it, and I can use the ruler to fold it up like that. Make sure you have clean hands when you're doing this because you don't want to get any schmutz on your paper. And keep those edges lined up as you crease the card. Don't let the edges get unaligned as you continue to crease it going down. There are people that use something called a bone folder just to burnish down the edge of the card. I'm not going to do that, but I am going to take a clean piece of a paper towel and make sure that it's a very tight crease. I'm using the paper towel because I don't want any of the oils or dirt from my fingers to get on the card. Okay? And now my card is ready to go, ready for me to lightly pencil my design and begin to paint. Sketching is done. Can you see how lightly I sketched? I'm going to move it closer so you can see the pencil marks. But it is a very extremely light sketch. I didn't do the lettering at all because I'm going to save that and do it by hand without penciling it underneath. But of course you can sketch yours. Other lettering ideas, if you'd like, you can print out lettering that you've created on your computer, and using our transfer method of covering the back of the paper with graphite and then tracing with a pencil on top, you can get a nice quality of type if you are not comfortable with hand lettering or experienced with hand lettering. But there's a lot of really fun, easy hand lettering that you yourself can do without using the method of copying a font. You can look these up online. Actually, I'll post a couple of links for you to some tutorials. I don't want to turn this into a hand lettering tutorial because I really want to get to us just making the card. But just wanted to let you know that you do have some options there. A couple things before I begin painting. I'm going to paint my lettering with a bit of black. You'll notice that I am using a palette. If you don't have a manufactured palette at home, I understand, but I think that it's important to mix up the paint ahead of time, not just use it straight out of the pan. And you guys did some watercolor value exercises last week, and you know that it is important to be able to control the paint, to control the lightness and the darkness and the consistency of it. So it's way easier to do that if you work with a palette. If you don't have a manufactured palette, simply use a dinner plate. Just, ask your mom, make sure it's okay to use it. If you're careful with it and if you wash it afterward, it shouldn't cause any harm. It's just watercolor. You want to be able to control the amount, and you'll see I'm mixing this up very densely right now. I don't have a lot of water in it because I want this to be very dark black like ink, and I'm going to write congratulations with it. Also, you don't have to use watercolor for your lettering if you don't want to. If you'd prefer, you may also choose to use a micron or a fine line pen, a felt tip like this, or a Sharpie. One thing I would suggest though is maybe take a couple pieces of the scrap paper that you cut off of your card. Make some marks with whatever marker you have. Let it dry and then watercolor on top of that and see how it reacts. Because some markers are great and they'll remain in place when you watercolor over them, but some markers will run. And it would be very disappointing to do your entire design and then you have this nice lettering that you like and your card gets ruined because maybe some water from the watercolor mixes in with the lettering and the whole thing runs all over the place. I'm mixing up some paint colors. I've pulled a few Prismacolored pencils to match. I find that this is an easy way for me to come up with a limited palette that looks good. So I just pull my colored pencils out. You can find color palettes everywhere online though, and you can of course experiment with different things. You have a very basic paint set. There are 8 pans, but of course you can mix. I'm opening up my card first, and I am going to tape it down. You don't have to tape all the way around if you do tape, but at least a little bit on the edges is helpful to keep the card from buckling. I'm not going to tape down here because the sleeve of the person's graduation gown is going to bleed right off the page. But I am going to put some tape right up here. I'm only catching a little bit of the edge of it. Our paper quality is not as stellar as I would like it to be, so I don't want to tear up the paper, so I don't want too much of the tape touching it. But I just need enough so that it will lie flat for me and not buckle as I paint, because that can get in the way and it can make your paint run in weird directions if you're using a lot of water. But I'm not going to use a lot of water either. That's another tip for you. Don't use too much water on these. Okay, that should keep it secured. I do need to make sure I have fresh water. My water looks kind of gross. It's important to change your paint water often, or at least use several cups so that you always have fresh paint water. So for my skin tone down here, I'm going to use just a little bit of this orange color, and let's see how this looks. I like to test things out. A little bit of the yellow. Too much yellow, hold on. That's why you have to test stuff out and go back and forth to get the exact right color before you start painting. Okay, I think this is going to be actually perfect because the more water I put into it, the more it's going to look like a basic skin tone. Can you see that? Okay. Basic for a Caucasian person. Okay, I'm ready. Let's get painting here. My design is finished on the outside. Now I'm going to untape it carefully because I don't want to tear off any of the paper. So I'm going very slowly and doing it very, very carefully. Most watercolor paper can withstand a little bit of masking tape. But again, I am not 100% confident in the quality of the watercolor paper that we're using. So just be very careful. Okay, looking good. I think I might take a moment with my eraser and try to clean up maybe some pencil lines. Do not do this unless you are absolutely 100% positive that your work is completely dry, because you could ruin your entire card if it's not. Okay. I'm happy with this. So now what I want to do is, I had written an example message, and you can do this in a Word doc or a Google Doc, whatever you'd like. I made sure that I arranged it on the page to fit inside a 5x7 card. And here is my message. I printed it out, cut it down, and I'm going to put it on the inside of the card. You could do this with a glue stick or maybe even a couple of dots of white glue. But if you do, use it very, very sparingly. If you use too much glue, it will definitely bleed through the paper and make it look messy and ugly. So you're barely going to use any glue on this. If you don't want to use glue, you could use something like this. This is called washi tape. It's a Japanese paper tape that is printed with different designs, but it's not hard to find. It's everywhere now. You can get it in Target, you can get it at the dollar store, or maybe even if you do bullet journaling or any kind of art journaling at home, you might even have some on hand. I'm going to go ahead and use this because I don't want to get glue showing through my thin printer paper. But you can do the glue if you do it very strategically. I just don't want to do that. Plus I found this tape that I had gotten a while back, and the colors match the card design really well. So I just cut that off, line it up centered, maybe a little more to the top so that there's room on the bottom to sign it. Here we go. So, finished card. Looks like that. And now I will sign it. You can sign your card however you'd like, depending on your relationship with that person. You could put love, or I'm going to put best wishes. When you're finished with your card, you'll take a picture of the outside, a picture of the inside, and submit it to Google Classroom. After you've submitted your card on Google Classroom for a grade, put it somewhere safe, and I will let you know in class how you're going to turn the card in. We're going to be mailing these to school, and they'll be put into 5x7 envelopes, which is why it's important that you get the size right, and given out to the seniors by Ms. Avanesian. So have fun with these and do a really great job. Try to think about what you would like to receive if you were a graduating senior.